At my son's oceanfront wedding, they sat me behind a column like I was staff. The next morning, I went to the ATM to pull cash for a quiet gift. The receipt said $0. Address update pending. By dusk, guardianship papers slid under my door. It cut deep, but I kept calm. I opened my late wife's cedar box, a small brass key, and a clause. Those villas are mine for life. My lawyer traced forged dementia notes and pulled Naomi's emails. In a few hours, a judge will decide whether I lose my name or they lose their masks. Stay with me to the end, and tell me which city you're watching from. Charleston's oceanfront ballroom shimmered that evening as if it were borrowed from a postcard. The chandeliers glowed soft gold, reflecting off windows that opened toward the Atlantic. The scent of salt drifted faintly through the open terrace doors, mixing with roses and perfume. Guests arrived in pairs and clusters, voices rising and falling like waves against the shore. Every usher and attendant bustled toward them, toward the younger couples, the women in silken gowns, the men in fresh-tailored suits. My arrival was quiet, nearly invisible, and no one hurried to greet me. It wasn't cruel, just a subtle reminder. I wasn't part of the center of the story tonight. When I reached for my place card, I paused. The thin rectangle of paper read, Mr. Bickford, support. The word pulled at me, strange, out of place, almost as if I had been slotted into a different category altogether. A waiter waved me vaguely toward the far edge of the room, where a table was pressed against a column near swinging doors marked Service. The chair was tucked partly out of sight, a perch for someone meant to observe but not belong. As I sat, one guest mistook me for staff, asking where to hang a coat. I gave a polite nod, corrected him gently, and watched him flush before hurrying away. From my vantage, the celebration stretched like a stage I'd been cut from. Marcus stood beneath the lights with Naomi, cameras clicking, laughter chasing after them. Every pose included her parents, their friends, her bridesmaids and groomsmen. When the photographer called, parents of the groom, I rose slightly, then stopped. Only Naomi's family shifted into place beside Marcus. The shutter clicked. The memory was captured without me. The applause that followed sounded louder from behind the column, though no one turned to check if the groom's father had been included. The small cuts kept coming. A woman in pearls asked if I could point her toward the coat check. A young man balancing drinks asked if I was with the vendor team. They weren't harsh. They were simply certain I wasn't supposed to be part of their circle. I steadied my hand around a glass of water, the condensation cool against my palm, letting silence cover what words could not. Later, a toast filled the room with sparkle and clinking glass. Naomi's mother raised her flute, smiling as cameras zoomed in. "To Marcus," she said, "for joining our family at last." She spoke warmly of her husband, her daughter, the bright future ahead. My name was not spoken. Evelyn's memory was not honored. Applause thundered. Champagne caught the light, and the camera lens swept carefully past me. I swallowed the emptiness with a sip of water, hearing Evelyn's voice in my memory reminding me to hold my ground with dignity. Marcus drifted over once, his tie loosened, smile a little too wide. "Dad, everything's handled," he said quickly, already turning as Naomi tugged him toward another group. The diamond on her hand caught the chandelier glow, dazzling, as if erasing the brief exchange. My answer came soft but firm. "I'm enjoying seeing you." He didn't hear it fully before he was gone again, absorbed into applause and laughter. The cake was cut. The cheers rose again, and the band struck its notes. From behind the column, I touched the pocket where Evelyn's keepsake waited, a habit I had carried for months. I had planned to offer something tonight, privately, away from the noise. But the ballroom's glow had made its division clear. There was Marcus's new life, and then there was me, tucked away with the help. The celebration closed with applause. I rose, blending into shadows near the service doors. A question lingered at the edge of my lips but never left. What exactly had been handled, and who decided I should be mistaken for the help? Charleston's streets were hushed the morning after the wedding, the salt air softer than the ballroom's perfume from the night before. My shoes tapped against the old bricks of Meeting Street, carrying me toward the ATM I'd used for years whenever we visited this side of town. The plan was simple: withdraw some cash as a quiet gift. Evelyn had always written notes to tuck into her envelopes, her neat script folding love into every dollar. That thought warmed me as I slid my card into the machine. The screen blinked twice before spitting back a message I hadn't seen before. Transaction declined. Address update pending. For a moment I thought I'd mistyped my PIN. I tried again. Same message. A small knot tightened in my chest. The sun was just beginning to rise, lighting the palms and storefronts. I wasn't about to let a machine spoil a morning meant for Evelyn's memory. I pressed the button for a printed receipt, certain a clearer answer would come from paper. It did, but not the kind I wanted. Balance, $0. My hand trembled, the slip fluttering like it wanted to fly from my fingers. Behind me, a young man in jogging shorts shifted impatiently, muttering, "Come on, old man." He couldn't see the numbers that hollowed me out more than his words ever could. It felt as if the world had peeled me open in public, though no one around had the faintest idea. I walked inside the branch, the lobby chilled with air conditioning. A teller in a pressed shirt offered a polite smile, but his eyes slid back to his monitor as I explained. "My account. There's a problem." He tapped keys, spoke in rehearsed tones. "There have been recent updates on account authorization. Nothing to worry about, sir." "Print me a statement," I said, voice steady but edged. The paper came with my name printed at the top. Still there. Yes, but beside it, in smaller print, pending co-authorization. I folded the sheet into my pocket and thanked him, though my stomach churned. Evelyn had warned me about letting anyone near these accounts. Had Marcus or Naomi? I left the bank with the uneasy sense that a door had been opened behind my back. That afternoon, Marcus showed up. Naomi stayed in the car, engine idling, her silhouette framed by sunglasses and impatience. My son carried an envelope, set it carefully on the kitchen table, and spread out papers with an air of practiced calm. "Dad, this is just housekeeping," he said. "Makes things easier for everyone. A formality." My eyes traced the legalese. Durable power of attorney. Streamline accounts. Simplify estate. Words chosen to sound harmless, yet dangerous if handled blindly. Evelyn's voice echoed in memory. Never sign anything without Alan. Alan, our old family lawyer, had been her compass in such matters. Marcus slid a pen toward me. His smile was too smooth. I picked it up, held it a moment, then set it back down. "I'll let Alan review this first." His jaw tightened. "Dad, it's nothing, just sign." "Then you won't mind me waiting," I answered. Silence stretched across the table. Outside, Naomi tapped the horn, once, sharp, impatient. It cut through the stillness like a verdict. Marcus gathered the papers. His hands a little less steady now. I slid the envelope back toward him, refusing without raising my voice. He left without another word, the front door closing harder than necessary, alone in the quiet. I pulled the crumpled ATM receipt from my pocket and placed it beside Evelyn's photo on the mantel. Her smile in that picture had always carried strength, even in her final years. "Was this your way of warning me?" I whispered. The paper and the photograph stared back, silent but heavy with meaning. That night, sleep would not come easily. Dawn pressed a pale line across the kitchen windows, and the kettle hummed like an old song that had forgotten its words. Roses waited on the back step, heads heavy with dew. Watering them usually settled the mind. Today it only thinned the unease left by that ATM slip, one astonishing line that said a life's work added up to nothing. The soil drank, the petals lifted, but the knot behind the ribs stayed tight. On the bookshelf by the table sat Evelyn's cedar box, small as a loaf of bread. The grain rubbed smooth by her hands. It had been there for months, maybe a year, softening into the room like a piece of air. The sight of it decided things for me. The lid released with a sigh when the brass latch turned. Cedar rose like a forest in miniature, clean and sharp. Inside lay a folded square of linen, one of her handkerchiefs, edges hemmed with patient stitches. The cloth gave way to a small, old-fashioned key the color of late sunlight, heavier than it looked. Alongside it, a slip of paper, corners rounded by time. The handwriting could only be hers, even strokes, no fuss. The quiet authority of a woman who made plans and kept them. "If I am not there to be the cautious one, call Alan before you sign anything. The brass key is for the safe. You will know which one." The letters steadied the room. The key warmed against my palm. Evelyn's voice arrived as if it had simply stepped in from the porch. She used to sit across from me at this very table, a green mug steaming between her hands. "Marcus is bright," she'd say, eyes soft and unsparing. "But he leans into shortcuts. Don't let him handle what he hasn't learned to respect. No cruelty in it. Only a mother's clear reading of a son still dazzled by speed. The last morning tea before her hospice bed came with the same tone, protective, unsentimental. She had insisted the accounts be built like good furniture, joints hidden but strong, nothing that wobbled when life pressed down. The phone interrupted the memory with its practical ring. A cheery voice from the pharmacy floated through. "Mr. Bickford, calling about your refill. We've received an updated prescription from your doctor. The dosage has been doubled, and there's a note to auto-renew because of potential memory decline. We just need your acknowledgement." The word decline slid cold under the shirt. "Who authorized the change?" The tech hesitated, shuffled keys. "It came from your doctor's office, sir. The note mentions concern about compliance due to age-related memory issues. Age deserves respect, not a rubber stamp. My appointments were on time, my lab steady. Whatever this was, it wasn't medicine." Hanging up left the kitchen louder, refrigerator clicking, kettle settling, gulls arguing in the distance. A prescription made to be stronger than needed, a note that rewrote a man as unreliable, a bank screen that erased a balance, a packet of papers pushed across a table with the word durable glowing like a trap. Strung together, the beads made a necklace no one would choose to wear. It was not only money. Then, it was competence. Custody over a name, the right to direct the next breath. Somewhere, someone had decided to draw a circle around me and label it unfit. And the people with the most to gain had already reached for a pen, the safe. The key lay in my fist, steadying and heavy. There were two safes in this life. A new one in the study that held passports and insurance, dull, rectangular, predictable, and an old one, short and stubborn, built into the floor of the closet behind the coats, a relic from the hardware store days when cash came home in paper bags. Evelyn had preferred the old one. "A thing we've trusted for decades will not betray us now," she'd tease. Her note had not bothered to specify. She knew I would remember which lock belonged to our history. Sun climbed, light reaching across the countertop to claim the box. The roses were already drying in the new heat. A thought struck hard and simple. The pharmacy note was not for my care. It was for a file. Paint the picture of a forgetful man. Lay it beside a form titled Simplify. Show a banker or a clerk a set of facts that line up. Shift authority 1 inch at a time until the final inch becomes easy to take. Whoever had carried the papers yesterday stood to benefit from a portrait where the father fumbled, where the husband misplaced names, where the widower needed help for his own good. A cleaner story for everyone who wanted access. Linen and paper returned to their places while the key remained on the table. A small sun. The mind went back over the week, then the month, then the quiet. Creeping favors I'd allowed, a password shared once because a screen looked confusing. A phone placed in a younger hand to install updates. A signature rushed because dinner was getting cold. These were not crimes. They were conveniences. But convenience can be the road by which a person is carried out of his own house. The kettle called again. A mug of tea grounded the hands. Across the room, Evelyn's photo watched with the same clear gaze she'd given me at 30 and 60, and on the last morning when we'd said so little because there was nothing left to invent. Her note joined the thin ATM receipt on the mantel. 2 scraps of paper holding the outline of a war I hadn't declared. The plan shaped itself without drama. Confirm everything. First with Alan, then with the bank. Speak carefully. Never in anger. Take copies. Let documentation do what rage cannot. There was a quiet power in method. A soft knock broke the thought. Not at the door, but inside the pocket. Phone again. Expectation rose for Alan's dry humor and his habit of clearing his throat before bad news. "Dad?" Marcus's voice instead, bright as a salesman's morning. "Wanted to check. Did you get around to those papers?" The question avoided the word sign. The question assumed a yes, looking at the key, at the note, at the receipt that said nothing and everything. The answer arranged itself. "We need to talk at the bank," came out even. "Downtown branch, tomorrow morning." A silence opened, just long enough to tell me he was calculating. "Sure," he said. "Whatever works." The call ended. The house reclaimed its gentle noises. The cedar box closed under my palm. Latch clicking home. The key slipped into the front pocket, cool against the fabric. A small anchor for the hours ahead. Whatever waited at the marble counter and under the banker's lights, it would meet a man who still knew which lock had held his marriage, his work, his name. The roses out back leaned toward the sun without apology. That felt like instruction. The marble floor of the downtown branch was so polished it mirrored the chandelier light above. A cool air wrapped around me as I stepped through the revolving door, cane tapping against the stone. Marcus was already there, his tie perfectly knotted, smile fixed like he had been rehearsing it. Naomi stood across the lobby, her heels clicking softly as she shifted her weight, phone in hand, eyes sharp as glass. "Dad," Marcus greeted, a touch too loud, as if the whole lobby needed to hear it. "Glad you could make it." I nodded, saying nothing, letting my eyes move over the tall counters, the discreet cameras tucked in corners, the way the tellers glanced up and then quickly looked away. It was Naomi the receptionist greeted first, her voice warm. "Mrs. Slayton, we'll be right with you." I was left standing, a man in his own suit, yet somehow invisible. We approached the counter together. The banker, young enough to be my grandson, pulled up the file. His tone carried the weight of someone trying to be professional but too easily swayed by whoever leaned closer. Marcus leaned close. "Here's the account in question," the banker said, eyes flicking to Marcus, not me. "Everything is listed under primary authorization, and Mr. Bickford, you are listed here as secondary. Supporting." The word landed heavy. Secondary. Supporting. Like I was an accessory to my own life. Marcus patted my shoulder as though he were guiding me through. "It's just a small adjustment, Dad. Makes things easier for everyone." I could feel the glances. Other customers waiting in line, staff glancing over from the side desks. I kept my breath steady, hands folded over the cane. The humiliation wasn't in the banker's tone. It was in the erasure, the quiet rewriting of my role, spoken in a public space where my name should have commanded respect. Evelyn would have hated it. "Could I have a printed statement, please?" My voice was calm, steady. The banker hesitated, glanced at Marcus, then handed me an envelope. I thanked him, every syllable measured. Marcus tried to laugh it off. "Dad, honestly, it's nothing, just efficiency." I didn't answer. I chose dignity over a scene. Walking slowly out of the lobby with the envelope under my arm. In the parking garage, the air was damp, the smell of oil clinging to the concrete. My steps echoed, the envelope firm in my grip. That was when Naomi's voice cut through the echo. She was around the corner, phone pressed to her ear, words low but sharp enough to slice through the shadows. "Once we finalize this, the villas are ours. He won't fight." Every word stopped me cold. Marcus's reply followed, his voice strained, almost defensive, but not enough. "He's too old to start now." The sound carried like betrayal carved in stone. My own son, writing me off as if I were just a frail signature waiting to be coerced. I stayed still, hidden by the concrete column, every muscle tight. The envelope under my arm felt like a shield and a weight all at once. Evelyn's voice returned, memory crisp. Never sign without Alan. She had known. She had seen this weakness long before I admitted it. Walking past them, I kept my silence. The words etched deep inside. They thought I wouldn't fight. They thought the villas, our life's love, the place Evelyn tended every rosebush and watched Clara chase gulls, were already theirs. Driving home, I took the long way along the coastline. The villas stood against the horizon, windows catching the late morning sun. My whisper was barely audible above the hum of the engine. If they want to fight, they'll have one, but on my terms. The dining table hadn't been this bare in years. I pushed aside the placemats Evelyn had embroidered, folded them neatly, and set them in the sideboard. The wood grain of the table, nicked by decades of Sunday suppers and birthday candles, became a stage for something different that night. I laid out the ATM receipt, Evelyn's note from the cedar box, the brass key, and every folder I had pulled from the study, piece by piece. It felt like stacking bricks, building a wall to protect what little I had left. The house was quiet but not still. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant surf from the coast, it all pressed against me while I sorted the papers. My fingers hesitated on each page, as though Evelyn herself had touched it last. In the glow of the lamp, I could almost imagine her at the other end of the table, chin resting on her hand, that look she had whenever she thought I was missing the obvious. When I reached her will, my breath slowed. I'd read it before, years back, but never line by line the way I did now, and then the clause stood out, as if underlined by her own pen. The beachfront villas were granted for Luther Bickford's lifetime use, transferable only upon his death. I let out a low exhale. They could pressure, deceive, even humiliate me in public. But as long as I lived, those villas were mine, ours. Evelyn had made sure of it. That clause was her hand stretched from the grave, steadying me. I dialed Alan's number, sliding the will closer as the phone rang. His voice came, a little gruffer than I remembered. "Luther? I was hoping you'd call." I told him about the ATM receipt, the forged medical notes, the bank lobby fiasco. Alan listened without interruption, then said, "Do not sign anything. Date everything you keep, and keep it close. I'll look into the hospital records quietly. If they've doctored something, we'll know." The steadiness in his tone was a relief, like a hand on the shoulder. I hung up, feeling the weight of both fear and relief. Then the phone rang again. This time it was Marcus. "Dad," he said too smoothly. "We need you to move quicker. Naomi's family is worried. They think you're dragging your feet. Don't embarrass us." His pause was deliberate. "People might start questioning whether you're fit to manage all this. Guardianship cases can be ugly." The words slid under my skin like ice water. It wasn't a threat shouted in anger. It was delivered with the calm edge of someone who had rehearsed. My own son suggesting I was incompetent. I let him talk. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a fight. When the silence stretched, I hung up. My hand trembled, but not from weakness. Rage has its own tremor. A knock at the door came not long after. Beatrice stood there with a church bulletin in her hand, smiled gentle as ever. She noticed the papers scattered across the table. Her eyes softened. "I went through this once," she whispered. "Don't let them rush you." She laid the bulletin down, then her hand over mine for a brief moment. "I'll pray for strength over your house." The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence felt lighter somehow. I returned to the table. The will lay at the center, Evelyn's note resting atop it. I placed her framed photo at the head of the table, the way she had once presided over family dinners. Her eyes, captured in that picture, seemed to meet mine. "You built these villas with me," I murmured, voice low, steady. "I won't let them erase you." Carefully, I gathered every paper, slid them into a manila envelope, and locked them inside the drawer in the sideboard. My fortress wasn't strong yet, but it was built on truth, and for now, that was enough. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, a faint rustle broke the stillness. I stepped into the hall, heart quickening. There, under the front door, a single envelope had been slipped across the floorboards. No stamp, no return address, just my name scrawled across the front in ink that bled slightly into the paper fibers. Morning light seeped through the blinds as I bent to pick up the envelope left at my door. The paper felt heavier than its size, edges sharp against my fingers, breaking the seal. I slid the pages out slowly. The bold header stole the air from my chest. Petition for guardianship. The words blurred before my eyes, but I forced them back into focus. Marcus's name, Naomi's beside it, both petitioning the court to assume guardianship over me, the man who raised Marcus from a boy into the man he was. Their claim was laid out in cold, legal language: declining mental faculties, inability to manage assets responsibly. My hand shook as I held the page, but I refused to let panic take root. I inhaled deep and slow. This was no mistake. It was a plan. Deliberate and precise. They wanted more than my dignity. They wanted Evelyn's villas, her legacy. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus's number. It rang only once. "Dad," he answered, voice smooth as if nothing was amiss. "Marcus," I said carefully, every syllable anchored. "Explain this." There was a pause, then his tone hardened. "It's for your own good. Dad, Naomi's family says you can't handle things anymore. We're protecting you." Behind him, Naomi's whisper floated through the line, faint but clear. "Tell him it's best this way. Push him to agree." My grip on the phone tightened. My own son, coached like a child. I wanted to scream, but instead I pressed my lips together, drew one steady breath, and cut the line before rage carried me somewhere I couldn't return from. The papers trembled in my lap, but I sat until my heartbeat slowed. They would not break me. Not like this. By mid-morning, I was standing on the courthouse steps beside Alan. Suits bustled past us, voices echoing in the marble lobby behind. Alan flipped through the petition with his lawyer's eyes, faster than mine could keep up. His face darkened. "Here," he said, tapping a stapled attachment. "They've included a medical evaluation." I leaned closer, stomach already sinking. It was a doctor's note claiming early dementia symptoms. Signed and dated. My name, my supposed diagnosis, twisted into proof against me. Alan lowered his voice, sharp and steady. "This is falsified. I'll subpoena the hospital records myself." "They can't get away with this, not if we act quickly." I swallowed hard. The betrayal digging deeper. My son and his wife weren't just chasing money. They were willing to smear me, to paint me as incompetent, unfit, just to strip me of everything I'd built. We turned to leave, but before we reached the sidewalk, Naomi appeared, perfectly dressed, diamonds glinting, a smile wide enough to cut glass. "Dad," she sang sweetly, loud enough for passers-by, "we're just protecting you. Everyone can see how much we care." Her hand brushed my arm, feigning affection, while her eyes bore into me like sharpened steel. Strangers nearby nodded approvingly, fooled by her performance. I clenched my jaw, holding silence. Arguing would only feed her play. My dignity was my shield, and for now, it was enough. That evening, I found myself in the garden, pruning roses under the fading sun. Each clip of the shears echoed in my chest, like severing ties that once held strong. The scent of salt from the ocean carried memories of Evelyn, her hands in the soil beside mine, her quiet words. "Stand firm, Luther. Don't let anyone rewrite your place in this family," I whispered into the twilight. "You left me these villas, Evelyn. I won't let them take them in your name." The garden fell still. Then Harold, my neighbor, leaned over the fence, voice low. "If they're willing to fake records, they'll try worse. Watch your back, Luther." I nodded without a word, gripping the petition until the paper creased deep lines into my palm. As night descended, headlights swept across my driveway, flooding the living room in stark white. They lingered, too long for a passerby. The engine idled, then cut off. I stood frozen at the window, the petition clutched in my hand. My gut told me this was only the beginning. The knock came just after sunrise, sharp and deliberate, echoing through the quiet of my house. Pulling the door open, I found a uniformed officer standing on my porch. His cap shadowed his face, but the clipboard in his hand told me this wasn't a neighborly call. He cleared his throat, his tone formal. "Mr. Bickford, I have papers to serve. They concern a report filed regarding your welfare and safety." The word welfare cut like glass. My hand tightened on the doorframe as he handed over the envelope. Inside, bold print accused me of erratic behavior and unsafe living conditions. Marcus's name appeared neatly on the signature line. Naomi's family's address was listed as the contact. Standing in my own doorway, I felt my dignity stripped layer by layer. For a moment, it wasn't the paper in my hand that burned. It was the realization that my own son had invited strangers into my home by way of law. I asked the officer, steady as I could manage, "Do you believe any of this?" His eyes softened. "Sir, I just deliver what I'm told, but I'd suggest stopping by the station to clear things up." The drive downtown was quiet except for the hum of tires. At the police station, the smell of disinfectant and old coffee lingered. A younger officer met me at the desk, file already open. "Mr. Bickford, we've had multiple complaints. Neighbors said you've been wandering at night, confused. There's mention of forgetfulness, and even unsafe cooking left unattended." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "I've kept roses alive longer than some marriages," I said, voice calm. "And I can tell you each neighbor's car by sound. Forgetful isn't the word you're looking for." He shifted uncomfortably. I asked for copies of every report. Pen scratched paper as he made the request official. I told him plainly, "My lawyer will be responding. I'm not signing a word." By the time I stepped back into the sunlight, Alan was waiting against the courthouse wall across the street, suit pressed sharp despite the heat. He took the papers, scanning quickly, his jaw tightened. "They're laying groundwork," he muttered. "These complaints aren't random. Naomi's setting up a picture of incompetence. Combined with guardianship, this is meant to box you in." His words steadied me. Alan had always been the one Evelyn trusted to see through smoke. Later, I walked into the church courtyard for a moment of peace. Birds scattered from the fountain as I passed, just beyond the roses Evelyn once helped plant. Two parishioners whispered. "Poor Luther," one said softly. "Slipping fast. His son's taking care of things now." My feet rooted to the stone path. That was the second cut of the day. Not legal, but social. Naomi hadn't just taken her schemes to lawyers. She had carried them into the pews, sowing doubt in the very community that had buried Evelyn with me. Pain sat heavy in my chest, heavier than any paper the officer had handed me. But then Harold appeared at my side, his voice firm. "Ignore it. I know a smear when I see one." His years as a cop gave weight to every word. He placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You're sharper than most men half your age. I'll testify if it comes to it." The knot in my chest loosened. Just a fraction. As dusk fell, I knelt in the garden behind the church, whispering Evelyn's name. The scent of roses drifted up, and I promised her, promised myself, that this fight wasn't only about villas or accounts. It was about my name, my dignity, my place as the man she had loved. Walking out of the courtyard, the phone buzzed in my pocket. Marcus's message lit the screen. "Dad, stop fighting this. You'll only make it worse for yourself." The glow of the words against the dark night tightened something deep inside. I gripped the phone, jaw set, and turned my steps toward Alan's office. Enough of silence. The invitation arrived on heavy paper stock, sealed in a way that made it look more like a summons than a gesture of peace. They called it a family meeting, Naomi's parents hosting at their estate on the Ashley River. The words, "to resolve this matter amicably," were written in Naomi's hand at the bottom. I tucked the card into my jacket pocket, already knowing that amicable wasn't the word for what waited. The estate's dining hall was all polished mahogany and chandeliers, the kind of place where wealth announces itself before anyone opens their mouth. Naomi's parents sat at the head of the table, stern, like judges. Marcus stood at their side, smiling too carefully. Naomi, dressed in steel blue silk, barely glanced at me when I entered. The hush that fell over the room said it all. I wasn't a guest here. I was a defendant. Her father cleared his throat, holding a folder as if it were scripture. "Luther, we've taken the liberty of drafting documents that will allow for a smooth transfer of management regarding the beachfront villas. Stability, you understand, is important for family reputation." Naomi leaned forward, eyes sharp. "It's what Evelyn would have wanted. Don't drag this out, Dad." The words hit like a slap. Evelyn had built those villas with me brick by brick. She'd never have wanted this circus. Still, the pressure of all their eyes pressed in, daring me to fold. I let my hand rest on the table, steadying myself. Evelyn's will was clear. The villas remain under my care until I'm gone. That is not up for debate. Naomi scoffed, a laugh that held no humor. Courts don't listen to ghosts. They listen to doctors, and doctors say your mind is slipping. The room tightened around me, Marcus staring at the papers, refusing to meet my eyes. For a moment, I thought the air itself had turned against me. Then, from a quiet corner, Beatrice's voice reached my ear. "Hold steady, Luther." It was all I needed. Before I could speak again, the doors opened. Alan stepped in, briefcase in hand, suit crisp despite the Charleston humidity. His timing was deliberate, calculated. He set the case on the table and looked straight at Naomi's parents. Before this conversation goes any further, I believe you all should hear something. He clicked a small recorder. Naomi's voice filled the room, unmistakable, caught in a moment she hadn't intended anyone outside her circle to hear. Once villas are ours, Marcus won't need his father around. We'll handle it. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. Naomi's mother's face drained of color. Her father shifted in his chair, lips pressed tight. Marcus finally looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, there was something besides cold calculation in his eyes. It was shame, or maybe just fear. Naomi sputtered, "That's taken out of context." But the denial landed flat. The recording had done its work. Her parents exchanged a glance, embarrassment plain. "Perhaps this conversation should pause," her father muttered. Marcus stepped back, as though the floor might give way beneath him. He didn't speak to me, didn't even try. I met his eyes anyway, voice steady. "You've underestimated me." The meeting dissolved into murmurs and shuffling chairs. Naomi stormed out, heels striking like hammers on the marble. Marcus followed, caught between loyalty and dread. His shoulders hunched. Alan closed his briefcase softly. "This isn't over," he whispered as we walked into the humid Charleston night. "They'll strike harder now." The estate's lawn was quiet, but headlights flared near the gate, too bright, too sharp. Marcus sat behind the wheel, face pale in the glow, staring at me through the glass. Rage and shame warred in his expression, a storm waiting to break. Alan's call came before the sun. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, dragging me out of sleep. His voice was tight, clipped, the way it got when news wasn't good. "Luther." Naomi filed an emergency court motion at dawn. She wants control of the villas frozen, immediately. The words sat heavy in my chest. For a moment, the room tilted, the shadows of the curtains swaying like they knew something I didn't. 65 years of work, of Evelyn's planning, of quiet sacrifices, all reduced to emotions stamped in legal ink. My first instinct was to crumple back into bed, to let the weight smother me. But that wasn't who Evelyn married. Patience. She'd always told me. Patience and strength. I pulled myself up, slipped on the old cardigan she'd mended more times than I could count, and whispered to her picture on the dresser, "I will show them I am not weak." The courthouse hall smelled of polish and old air. Naomi was already there, heels clicking sharp against the marble, her parents standing behind her like bodyguards. She carried herself with the assurance of someone convinced the law was just another tool to bend. Marcus lingered a few steps back, silent. His shoulders slumped as though the suit he wore weighed more than he did. When our eyes almost met, he turned away. Alan arrived at my side, briefcase snapping open with a practiced flick. He handed the clerk a thick packet of counter-evidence, Evelyn's will clause, medical records free of any dementia claim, and the audio recording we'd used before. The judge scanned both sides, his expression unreadable. "Finally," he said. "Given the disputes and evidence presented, this motion is delayed. A full hearing will be scheduled." It wasn't victory, but it wasn't defeat either. For now, the villas still had my name on them. For now, Evelyn's wishes still stood on the courthouse steps. Marcus finally looked at me, not with anger, not even with defiance, but with something I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Doubt. His lips barely moved. Maybe this has gone too far. Naomi's head snapped toward him, eyes cold. "We're in too deep to stop now," she hissed, words slicing the air. She tugged his arm, pulling him back toward her parents. He went, but not without a glance that lingered a second too long. A fracture. Small but there. The church courtyard was quieter than the courthouse, though my heart still beat with the same uneven thrum. Beatrice found me sitting on the bench, papers still folded in my coat pocket. She didn't ask what happened. She read it in my face. "I went through the same once," she said, settling beside me. "Family turning legal against blood. You don't forget that sting. Her voice softened. But the truth has longer legs than lies. It outlives them. She touched my arm, steady, solid. If you need me to testify, I will. Folks need to see you as I do. Something in me, worn thin, steadied again. Her words didn't erase the hurt, but they stitched it enough for me to breathe easier. By evening, I was back in my garden. The roses needed trimming, and I needed the rhythm. Clip, pull, breathe. The earth smelled like rain even though the sky stayed dry. Evelyn's voice lingered in memory. Patience. Always patience. From the house next door came Clara's laughter, light and ringing. A reminder that innocence still existed in this world, untouched by greed or betrayal. It was a sound that reminded me why I had to keep going, not just for villas or money, but for the dignity Evelyn built into our family. As the light dimmed, Harold's boots crunched up the gravel path. He leaned against the fence, arms crossed. I've seen plenty of fights, Luther, and I'll tell you, when they start eating each other, that's when they're weakest. Be ready. I nodded, gripping Evelyn's old garden shears. They weren't a weapon, but they felt like resolve. Something passed from her hands to mine. That night, as I set the shears down and wiped my hands, headlights swept across my driveway. The car idled too long to be casual. When the engine cut, Marcus stepped out, walking slowly toward my porch. His eyes were red, his shoulders sagging. "Dad," he whispered, voice breaking. "We need to talk, without Naomi." The house was silent except for the tick of the old wall clock. Marcus sat across from me at the kitchen table, his hands trembling as they wrapped around a mug of tea he hadn't touched. His eyes were red, bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days. "Dad," he whispered, voice breaking. "I can't keep this up. Naomi's been pushing everything. The lawsuit, the guardianship, even the medical papers. She said if I didn't go along, I'd lose Clara." The words hung in the air heavier than any hammer. Betrayal still burned, but there was a flicker of something different in his voice. Fear, maybe even regret. He slid a folder toward me. Documents printed with Naomi's neat but unforgiving hand. False reports, financial drafts, and emails disguised as if I had approved them. "I never wanted this," Marcus muttered, staring at his lap. "But she won't stop, and if I resist her, she'll take Clara away from me." It was the first time I saw my son not as my adversary, but as a man trapped in his own making. Still, the pain cut deep. "You're still my son," I told him, measured and firm, "but you chose her over the truth." He looked up, tears glistening, but there was no defense on his lips, only silence. He rose slowly, leaving the folder behind, and whispered, "I don't know how to fix this." The door shut softly behind him, but it sounded like thunder. By morning, I was at Alan's office. The folder clutched under my arm. His desk was already stacked high with files. But he made room, scanning Naomi's forged documents with quick, sharp eyes. "She overplayed her hand," Alan said. "These inconsistencies. They'll hang her in front of a judge. We'll subpoena her emails, financial records. This gives us leverage, Luther." For the first time in weeks, a glimmer of hope pushed through the fog, yet hope felt fragile, and I braced for the storm Naomi would surely unleash when she realized Marcus had broken ranks. The storm came sooner than I thought. At Sunday service, just as the last hymn faded, Naomi strode across the church courtyard. Her heels struck the stone sharply, and her voice carried like a whip. "Everyone should know the truth," she shouted, her fingers stabbing the air at me. "He's hiding millions in villas while pretending to be the poor, grieving widower. Do you think that's righteous?" The congregation stirred, eyes turning toward me. A few gasps, whispers rippling like a tide. My chest tightened, but I stood silent, letting the moment pass to her disadvantage. Then Beatrice's voice rose, calm and steady as ever. "Naomi, enough. We've known Luther all our lives. We know his integrity." Her words weren't shouted, but they cut sharper than Naomi's fury. I saw the shift in the crowd, heads turning away from Naomi, whispers souring against her. Even one of her aunts tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Stop this before you embarrass yourself." Naomi's face burned crimson, her anger cracking into desperation. I walked away, not in triumph, but in quiet resolve. For once, she had overreached, and the ground beneath her was starting to crumble. Outside the church, Clara ran up, her little arms wrapping tight around my waist. Grandpa love outlasts anger. That night, back at home, I trimmed the roses in the fading light. Petals fell like soft reminders of how fragile family ties could be. A courier arrived just as dusk turned to dark, handing me a thick envelope marked with urgency. I opened it under the porch light, the words glaring back at me. Emergency injunction hearing, 72 hours. The fight had just been pulled into court. Faster than I imagined. The courthouse in Charleston carried a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Marble floors echoed with footsteps, and voices hushed into whispers the moment I walked in with Alan at my side. Families, neighbors, even a few from church had gathered, as if this were some kind of spectacle. Across the aisle, Naomi stood in a navy suit, her posture rehearsed, her lips moving as she whispered to her lawyer. Marcus hovered just behind her, his hands folded, his eyes flickering anywhere but toward me. Alan leaned close. "Stay calm. Let them overplay their hand." When the bailiff called us forward, Naomi's lawyer rose first. His words were sharp, calculated, almost smug. "Your Honor, the evidence shows Mr. Luther Bickford is no longer capable of responsibly managing extensive real estate holdings. Medical files confirm early-stage dementia. His recent erratic behavior confirms the risk." I felt the eyes of the room shift toward me. Some in the benches looked on with pity, others with doubt. My knuckles pressed against the polished wood table, but I kept steady, watching the judge, not the crowd. The lawyer waved a stack of papers. "This petition is not about greed. It's about protection. Our client, Mrs. Naomi Bickford, and her husband Marcus, have acted out of duty to ensure stability." My heart thudded, but I gave no reaction. Years of sitting through Evelyn's long church committees had taught me one thing. Sometimes silence carries more weight than protest. The judge nodded. "We'll hear from the respondent's counsel." Alan stood, adjusting his glasses. His voice carried clear and even. "Your Honor, my client is 76. Yes, but incapable. Let us address the so-called evidence. These medical files claim dementia. We subpoenaed the hospital directly. The official record shows no such diagnosis." He held up certified documents with the hospital's seal. "What's been presented here is a forgery." Gasps rippled through the gallery. I heard someone murmur, "Lord have mercy." Naomi stiffened, her lips tightening, her lawyer fumbling for words. Alan pressed on. "Not only is the diagnosis fabricated, but the dosage listed on his prescription was altered. We will present testimony from the pharmacist who noticed irregularities. This was no mistake. It was deliberate fraud." The judge's brow furrowed. He turned sharply. "Mrs. Bickford, is this your evidence?" Naomi's lawyer tried to interject. "Clerical errors, Your Honor." But Naomi's voice cut in, high and brittle. "We were only trying to protect him. He doesn't know how to—" She stopped short when Marcus tugged lightly at her sleeve. The judge wasn't done. His gaze shifted. "Mr. Marcus Bickford, did you know about these documents before presenting them?" All sound seemed to drain out of the room. Marcus swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. His lips parted, but no words came. His eyes darted from Naomi to me, then to the floor. I trusted Naomi. She said this was necessary." His voice cracked, barely audible. My chest ached watching him. My only son caught between truth and loyalty. For a fleeting moment, I saw the boy who once held Evelyn's hand at the beach, terrified of losing sight of her in the tide. The judge leaned back, silent for a long beat. Then he spoke, slow and heavy. "This court does not tolerate false filings. We will investigate further. For now, the petition is delayed." Alan nodded, signaling for our next move. He called Beatrice to the stand. She walked with quiet confidence, a folded paper clutched in her hand. Her voice was soft, but firm. I've known Luther for over 40 years. He reads scripture at church, tends roses daily, helps neighbors. His late wife Evelyn trusted him to safeguard what they built. He is clear-minded and kind-hearted. Any claim otherwise is a lie. The judge listened intently, scribbling notes. The room seemed to shift, the weight of accusation loosening its grip. Naomi glared daggers at Beatrice, but the effect was lost. Several heads in the gallery were already turning away from her. By the time the gavel struck, the atmosphere had changed. The judge postponed the final ruling but looked directly at Naomi. If further evidence shows intentional falsification, expect serious legal consequences. Naomi's face flushed, her teeth clenched. Marcus kept his eyes down. As the bailiff dismissed us, I rose slowly, gripping the table edge to steady myself. Alan whispered, "The tide is turning." Walking out into the courthouse corridor, the crowd parted. Naomi brushed past me, her perfume sharp, her words sharper. "This isn't over. You'll regret crossing me." I didn't answer. Instead, I lifted my gaze to the ceiling's high windows, the Charleston sun flooding through. Quietly, in my heart, I spoke to Evelyn. "The fight isn't finished, but your voice carried today. We are not done." The Charleston County Courthouse felt heavier that morning, as if the very walls had absorbed weeks of lies, whispers, and strained silence. Fog clung to the streets outside, wrapping the city in a damp stillness. Inside, every seat in the gallery was filled, neighbors, parishioners, and curious onlookers who had followed every headline. Naomi sat rigid at the plaintiff's table, her chin tilted upward with the confidence of someone who still believed she could bend truth to her will. Marcus beside her looked like a shadow, drawn, pale, shoulders hunched. Alan leaned toward me, his files stacked neatly on the table, and whispered, "We're ready. Luther, this ends today." The judge entered, gavel striking with authority. "This court is reconvened for final arguments in Bickford versus Bickford." His voice cut through the murmurs. My name on his tongue felt strange. Once just a man, a father, now a headline, a case, a spectacle. Naomi's lawyer rose first, spinning her story one last time. "Your Honor, Mr. Bickford is 76, in fragile health, incapable of responsibly managing properties of this size and value. For the sake of family stability, guardianship is essential." He gestured toward Naomi, who lowered her eyes demurely, the picture of feigned concern. I kept my gaze steady, Evelyn's words echoing in memory. "Don't flinch. Truth holds its own weight." Alan stood, buttoned his jacket, and slid a flash drive onto the court's evidence tray. "Your Honor, before we proceed further, the defense submits digital communications recently subpoenaed from Mrs. Naomi Bickford's accounts." The clerk projected the contents onto the screen for all to see. Email chains appeared. Naomi's own words, cold and unmistakable. "Once the villas are under my control, Marcus won't need his father anymore. Doctors can be persuaded, paperwork can be arranged, we'll be set for life." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Naomi's mask cracked. She lurched to her feet, pointing at Marcus. "You were supposed to delete those." The judge's gavel slammed. "Order." His eyes bore into Naomi. "Mrs. Bickford, these are your emails. This court will have your direct answer. Did you or did you not write these?" Her voice faltered, rage spilling out. "Everyone does what's necessary for survival. He's old, useless. Why should he keep all that wealth while the rest of us struggle?" The gallery erupted. Her parents shifted uncomfortably, faces red with shame. Naomi's lawyer buried his head in his notes. For the first time, Naomi stood exposed, her greed undeniable. The judge's tone hardened. "Mrs. Bickford, you are on the verge of perjury. This evidence demonstrates fraud. You will face consequences." Beside her, Marcus trembled, sweat shining on his forehead. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Bickford, were you complicit in these forgeries?" The room fell silent. My son looked at me, eyes brimming with tears. and then at the woman he had chosen over truth. His voice cracked. I knew. I knew she pushed it. I let it happen because I was afraid of losing her, of losing Clara, but in doing so, I lost my father. He turned toward me, voice breaking louder. Dad, I failed you as a son. I'm sorry. Every word pierced, but strangely they healed too. I nodded once, not smiling, not yet forgiving, but allowing space for redemption. Alan pressed forward. Your Honor, given this confession and the fraudulent evidence already exposed, the defense requests immediate dismissal of guardianship and affirmation of Mr. Bickford's full legal rights. The judge leaned back, face stern but resolute. This court rules in favor of Mr. Luther Bickford. Guardianship petition denied. Furthermore, I am ordering referral for investigation into fraudulent filings by Mrs. Naomi Bickford. Any attempt to interfere with Mr. Bickford's estate going forward will be met with criminal sanctions. The gavel struck. Naomi let out a strangled cry, shoved her chair back, and stormed out, ignoring even Marcus. Her parents followed in stiff silence, their reputations fractured. Beatrice caught my eye from the back row, giving a small nod, steady as always, and then Clara, breaking free from her mother's grip, ran across the aisle to me. She hugged my waist tightly. Grandpa, you're safe now. The weight of weeks lifted in that embrace. Justice had not restored all, but it had secured the most important thing, dignity, truth, and the bond that greed could not sever. Outside the courthouse, Marcus approached. His face was pale, his voice low. Dad, I don't deserve it, but I want to make this right. For Clara's sake, will you let me try? I looked at him for a long time. You have a road to walk, Marcus. I can't walk it for you, but if you're ready to start, I won't close the door. That evening, back at the beachfront villa, the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in gold and crimson. I stood in the garden Evelyn once tended, hands deep in the soil, trimming roses just as she had taught me. The ocean roared steady beyond the dunes, eternal and forgiving. Beatrice stopped by, offering gentle words. Justice came at last. I nodded. It did, but it came because we didn't bend to fear. Later, alone, I gazed at Evelyn's picture set on the porch table. They tried to erase us, love, but we endured. Your roses still bloom, and our name still holds. Clara's laughter drifted from inside, light and free, the sound of hope unchained. As the sky dimmed, I whispered one final truth to the sea and to her memory. They tried to bury me in silence, but the truth was louder, because wealth fades, homes weather, but dignity, once defended, becomes the truest inheritance. And tonight, in the quiet of Evelyn's garden, I finally felt at peace.